how many of you were here when we finished Maha-nidana Sutta? Okay, here are some seats, you can sit here. Okay. Okay. I think you were here and Bhante Dhamma was here. Yeah. And who else was here? You were here. Okay, others are all new. I cannot go through Maha-nidana Sutta again, but I like to give you a little brief account of Maha-nidana Sutta. Samadhiti is right view. Whenever Sariputta delivered that discourse in Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 9, there he combined Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination, with the Four Noble Truths, and explained that sutta in 16 steps. You were here, right? So when he finished one section, the monks prompted him for another question. They asked, when he answered that, he asked another question, all leading up to the end of that discourse. Last week we mentioned dependent origination both in Pali and English. And I rehearsed all those who were here to recite the dependent origination both in Pali and English. I urged everybody to memorize it. Now I want to have a little quiz. How many of you have memorized? You memorized? Very good.
Just the first,
the
fourth. I think I have it. I think. Yeah, maybe.
I think Rupa was not here last week, were you?
I was here.
You were here. Is Nanda Kumar coming?
No, he's not coming.
Okay. I'm asking, I cannot see you, you move a little bit this way so that I can see. Have you memorized Paticca Samuppada?
I did a little, yeah.
Not little.
I know the last those. I
What?
know the dependent, like what is dependent what, but I don't know the two phrases where say this is because of this happens. That I have not yet got.
Okay. To refresh your memory, either Monica or Kalina. Who wants to recite?
The part the 12 steps. So it's avijja, sankara, avijja, pachaya, sankara, sankara, pachaya, vijnana, vijnana, sankara, namarupa, pachaya, salayatana, salayatana, pachaya, salayatana, pachaya, pasa, pachaya, Tanha.
No.
Tanha
Phassa
Pachaya
Pachaya
Upadana.
Vedana.
Vedana. Phassa Pachaya Vedana. Vedana Pachaya Tanha. Tanha Pachaya Upadana. Upadana Pachaya Bhavo. Bhavo Pachaya Jati. Jati Pachaya Marana.
Jara.
Jarana. Jara Marana. Yeah, that's
Soka Parideva Dukkha Dvamana Supayasa Sambhavanti. Okay? You recite the reverse order.
So, with the formula Bhante, imasmin asati idam na hoti. Imasa.
That is the formula.
That is the formula. Okay. Avijaya feva asesa viraga nirodha sankara nirodha sankara nirodha
Sankara
sankara
Nirodha.
nirodha vinyana nirodha vinyana nirodha namarupa nirodha namarupa nirodha salayatana nirodha salayatana nirodha passa nirodha passa nirodha Vedana nirodha Vedana nirodha Tanha nirodha Tanha nirodha Upadana nirodha Upadana nirodha Bhava nirodha Bhava nirodha Jati nirodha Jati nirodha Jara marana Soka parideva dukkha dhamana supayasya nirodha Kevalatasa kevalatasa dukkha kandasa nirodha hoti.
Nirodha Hoti. Very good. Very good. Okay. At least two of you memorized it. Now, anybody can say it in English? Saying it in English is much easier. Depending on ignorance,
Volitional formations arise. Depending on volitional formations, consciousness arises. Depending on consciousness, mentality and materiality arise. Dependent on mentality and materiality, so sixfold sense base arises. Dependent on the sixfold sense base, contact arises. Dependent on contact, feeling arises. Dependent on feeling, craving arises. Dependent on craving, clinging arises. Dependent on clinging, becoming arises. Dependent on becoming, birth arises. Dependent on birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair arise, and thus there is the arising of this whole mass of suffering.
right? Depending on birth, growth, decay, sorrow, lamentation, pain,
Aging
grief,
and
and
death, okay.
all of them arise. Okay. Reverse order.
Depending on with the cessation of mental formation is the cessation
Depending on what?
with
Ignorance.
the cessation of ignorance is the cessation of mental formation. With the sensation of mental formation is the cessation of consciousness, birth consciousness. With the cessation of birth consciousness is the cessation of name and form. With the cessation of name and form is the cessation of this sixfold sense basis. With the cessation of the sixfold sense basis is the cessation of feeling. Contact is the cessation of contact. With the cessation of contact is the cessation of feeling. With the cessation of feeling is the cessation of craving. With the cessation of craving is the cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging is the cessation of becoming. With the cessation of becoming is the cessation of birth. With the cessation of birth is the cessation of aging and dying, and with the cessation of aging and dying is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering.
Very good. With little bit here and there. You did very well. Okay. Now, friends, this is the course that we are going to have every Saturday. Dependent origination. Many people ask me to have a course on dependent origination. So this is just the formula. Last week we went through this several times, and in this right discourse on right view, Venerable Sariputta used this 12 links connecting with the Four Noble Truths. And for the 12 links, he added 4 more links. First is karma, then the nutriments, then the Four Noble Truths. And then the last, he added another one, that is that ignorance also has a cause. Generally, we end dependent origination, as you all have recited, we end in ignorance. Beginning is ignorance, ending is ignorance. That means when ignorance is completely demolished, destroyed, the entire mass of suffering ends, or the links will collapse. It is like a domino effect. When you break one, then everything gradually falls. But ignorance also has a cause. Now those who were in that discourse, in that class, we had it for 2 or 3 years, that class, because it is very long discourse. Does anybody remember the cause of ignorance?
Not knowing the Four Noble Truths.
That is called ignorance.
Oh,
Not knowing the Four Noble Truths is called ignorance. What is the cause of ignorance?
Oh, the cause of ignorance.
Okay, now I want to, you remember?
I think it's birth.
No.
Sankara?
Eh?
Sankara?
No.
What it says.
Cause of ignorance is asava. Asava samudaya, avidya samudayo. Asava nirodha, avidya nirodha. Asava means, in Samadhi Sutta you can see, asava means influx. That which flows, like water in a river, it flows. As long as this asava means the samsaric habits, defilements remain in the most subtle way in our, I may use subconscious mind. This asava remains in our subconscious mind, coming from our samsaric existence. So there is ignorance does not have a beginning. We cannot say ignorance started at such and such a point. Before that there was no ignorance. We cannot say that. Why we cannot say that? Because the beginning is indiscernible. The beginning, although we have all kind of physics speculations, Buddha said the real beginning of ignorance is indiscernible. Now, why is that? Because it also has an underlying influx called asava. Asava. There are 4 kinds of asavas. I have listed in the handout. They are sensual pleasure, kamoga, and asava also are called oga. Oga. Oga means flood. In Samyutta Nikaya, the first stanza in Samyutta Nikaya, this is mentioned, that there are one deity came to the Buddha and asked him, how did he cross these ogres? At the end of your notes, you will see the stanza that the deity asked the Buddha. The Buddha replied, he asked, okay, good sir, how did you cross the flood? Then the Buddha replied, neither standing nor swimming, sir, I crossed the flood. But in what way did you cross the flood? Neither standing nor swimming. He said, when I stood still, I went under. And when I swam, I was swept away. That's how I crossed the flood, neither standing nor swimming. Actually, here swimming is not the correct translation, although I copied it from somebody else. Here, swimming, struggling. When you jump into water, if you struggle, you sink. It had happened to me. It had happened to me when I did not know how to swim. When I was about 17 years old, I was challenged by a little novice boy to cross the river. He swam like a fish. And he asked me, jump in, come on in. I was so proud of him. I'm older than him. He was about 8 years old. I was about 17 years old. I cannot tell him that I cannot swim because of my pride. So I also tied my underrobe, jumped into the water. Hardly I moved 5 feet. Then I struggled and I sank. Sank and touched my feet. The feet touched the bottom of the river, and then I came up, drinking dirty water. That river was full of dirty water. When I came up, this boy was on the other side of the river. He saw me, and he knew that I could not swim. He came very quickly, and he could not find hair, so he held by my ear and pulled me. And when I came, my head came out of water. He left me, and then he ran, he swam. Then when he was swimming, I grabbed him, I caught his clothes, and he untied and he swam naked. And then he shouted, that was near a train station. A man at the train station had jumped, and by the time I had gone 3 times, down, up, Last time I saw the whole world was one red ball because my capillaries are filled with blood. This boy has told him, he went down at that point, when he may be dead by now, go and bring him. So I did not know all these things. After a while I saw a man was on my body, looking at me and smiling. What happened? He brought me out and removed water and gave mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and I opened my eyes. Only then I saw this man over my body. And hundreds of people who came to the train station heard this, and they also came to see this drowning man. And then I came to understand all these things from these people's explanation. That was the first time I got good publicity. Because the next day in newspaper, my picture and all these things were appeared. So anyway, when you struggle in the water, you will sink. Therefore, the word swimming is not correct here. Anyway, if you stand still, you will go under. And if you try to struggle, you will be carried away by the water. Anyway, that is how the Buddha answered the question. Now, he crossed these floods, 4 types of floods. One is sensual pressure, the other is flood of becoming, flood of wrong view. I incorrectly typed as ring view, it is wrong view. And flood of ignorance. You can correct in a paper the word ring view, it is not ring view, wrong view. Now, so these are called asavas. Asava, as I said, is the flow. Sometimes it is translated into English as influx. Influx and outflux. Influx, when you think of a river, water is coming towards you. When you are in the middle of the river, water is coming towards you. And then water passes you. If you are caught in it, you will be carried away in water. And you have to be very mindful and careful not to get carried away. That also happened to me once when a river was flooded, Kalani River, very famous river in Sri Lanka. I had given a Dhamma talk in my monks' college, and my audience were all my teachers, all my classmates, all my college students, and supporters, hundreds of people. After giving Dhamma talk, I came to the road, there was no bus, I walked 6-7 miles and at night and stood at a certain place, and then I had the flashlight, lighting it, I shouted. A man on the other side of the river came in a boat to take me. As soon as he came, he gave me also a row to row the boat. I never rowed a boat. When I put the row into the water, the boat was going to turn over, topple down. And this man took, it was about from here to maybe the roadside, that long white river. I was there at about 1 o'clock in the morning. Till 3 o'clock he could not cross the water because we were carried by the water. Instead of going straight, he had to go round. By 3 o'clock we reached that side. So I know from my experience, if you get into the water, especially flooded river, you know what will happen. So, sensual pleasure is like that. That is what I want to explain. Sensual pleasure is like that. Don't get offended, don't feel bad, and just imagine how much we try to please our eyes, our ears, nose, tongue, body and mind for pleasure. We all know that, and we all try to pretend that it is not so, and we get involved in it. And it is therefore liberating ourselves from that flood is not easy job. Not easy job. I don't know whether you agree with me or not. All you have to do is to think very carefully, mindfully, when you are all alone. You all are in that, trying to enjoy sensual pleasure without pain. Try to enjoy sensual pleasure without pain. And try to liberate your mind from suffering. We try to liberate our mind from suffering while enjoying sensual pleasure. Not, on the other hand, you may think, I must get rid of sensual pleasure and have total freedom and have total peace. You may try. See how hard it is. Why? On the one hand, you got stuck there and you stand still in there, in the sensual pleasure, and you sink. Or you struggle to get rid of it, and you get carried away. Sensual pleasure. I'm not telling anybody that they like to hear. I'm just explaining Dhamma, that's all. Whether you agree or not, this is the truth. So this is one flood. Just imagine when there are 4 of them, then one is so difficult to overcome, how more difficult it could be when 4 are there. What is the next thing is? Flood of becoming. Becoming means flood of being. Flood of being a person. I want to be myself. So many things affect us in our life, and we cannot be by ourselves. So many things are happening. So, and we have to be ourselves in order to be free from suffering. Then flood of wrong views. That is even more difficult. We have all kind of views. When we come down in the course, I will explain some of that. Then the last one is flood of ignorance. Ignorance has many definitions. Here, the meaning ignorance means, as you all mentioned earlier, not knowing the Four Noble Truths. For not knowing dependent origination is ignorance. Not knowing Four Noble Truths is ignorance. Not knowing anicca, dukkha, anatta is impermanent. What you call is ignorance. Anicca means impermanence, dukkha means suffering, anatta means no self. Not knowing these three exactly as they are is ignorance. Now each of them is a flood and or influx. And therefore it is not very easy to overcome. Then I also like to draw your attention to the next section, overcoming these asavas, 7 of them. I mean four asavas, 4 floods. I think you have all read, if you have not read, I urge you to read the Sutta number 2 of Majjhima Nikaya. It's called Sabbasava Sutta. Sabbasava Sutta. Buddha said, Sabbasava Pariyahang O Bhikkhave Desisami. Because I teach you a way of overcoming all asavas, sabba asava, all floods, all influxes. And there are, he gave in that discourse 7 ways of overcoming these floods. Now take each of them separately. Taints, some individuals translate it as taints. I like to stay with the influx, flood. Taints to be abandoned by seeing. Buddha said this taint can be overcome by seeing and knowing. Jnana darsana. Jnana means knowing, darsana means seeing. And darsana pahatabba asava. Darsana means seeing. Darsana also is used for philosophy. But this is not just a philosophical seeing. In philosophy you cannot come to a conclusion. Because when one theme is developed, another theme arises in your mind. Because it involves logic. And therefore logic is unending process of thinking. And therefore philosophy, I studied philosophy for my degrees. I still don't understand it. But one thing I understood, it is so confusing, speculating, thinking. Therefore, darsana, although the word darsana used in Pali and Sinhalese and so forth for philosophy, this darsana is not philosophical saying. But this darsana is seeing with wisdom. It is called Yoniso Manasikara. Yoniso Manasikara. Yoni means origin, source, beginning, root. Seeing things from the root. That is why dependent origination is so important. We must see things from the root. At least, I mentioned earlier that the beginning of ignorance is indiscernible. And this samsaric existence is like a circle. You have seen circles. When you see a circle, here are so many circles, you cannot find the beginning of a circle. No matter how much geometry we know, we can know the radius, diameter, circumference, area of a circle. But we do not see the beginning of a circle. Samsara is like that. And Buddha mentioned it in Samyutta Nikaya, Anamatagoyam bhikkhave samsaro pubbhakurina panyati avidyaja bhavatannaja. Because I declare that the origin of existence is indiscernible because of ignorance and craving. And also he said, ignorance, you cannot say ignorance began at such and such a time, and before that there was no ignorance. Similarly, you cannot say craving started at such and such a time, before that there was no craving. And therefore both ignorance and craving also goes in circle, in this cycle of existence. Then, why the Buddha tried to teach this dependent origination? If it is indiscernible, why did he waste his time? Friends, he did not waste his time. He knew how to end this cycle. To end the cycle, he knew how to begin the cycle. What is the beginning of cycle? To find the beginning of a cycle, you simply draw a line. You draw a line. And then you start from that line, go clockwise and come back to the same line. That is the beginning, that is the end. That is the only way to find the beginning. So he found the beginning of all this is influxes and then ignorance. So, and therefore he needs to begin things with understanding, seeing them exactly as they are with wisdom. That is the key word, wisdom. Knowing things from the root, yoniso manasikara, mindful reflection. He attends mindfully, he attends wisely. This is suffering. I think we mentioned this many times. Suffering we cannot teach somebody suffering. We cannot teach. One must see it within oneself. And this particular feature, the characteristics of Dhamma is mentioned in Dhamma, the description of Dhamma, quality of Dhamma. Pacchattam veditabbo vinyohi. We recite that Pacchattam veditabbo vinyohi. Each and every wise individual must realize by himself or herself. So we cannot teach it. but each person must realize it. Then, ei passivo, come and see. Come and see. Come within and see within, introspectively. So nobody can teach suffering to anybody. One must see it by oneself, within oneself. Some individuals say suffering is caused by so and so. Some people say suffering is caused by myself. Some people say suffering is caused by them and me. Some people say suffering, none of us create suffering. Somebody else from somewhere implanted in us, and so forth. But the real way of knowing this is to, with clear state of mind, of course since we have ignorance, mind will not be clear as we expect, but try to look at us unbiasedly, impartially, look at ourselves. Then we see what the suffering is. And that is called wise attention. And then see the origin of suffering. Why I suffer? I must ask myself honestly, sincerely, why I suffer. Why I suffer? Because of my greed and ignorance. He attends wisely, this is the cessation of suffering. Here again, we see the dependent origination in this Four Noble Truth formula itself. This is the cessation of suffering, and this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Dependent origination is there. How? What is the dependent origination formula? You mentioned it.
Formula? Imasming sati idang hoti.
Very good.
Imassa uppada idang uppajjati. And then the reverse. Imasming asati idang nahoti. Imassa nirodha idang nirodhati.
Very good. You see? Very good. Imasmin sati idang hoti. Meaning, when this is, or this being, this is. This arising, this arises. This not being, this is not. With the cessation of this ceases. Words are very simple, but the whole dependent origination formula is there. That means two things we have to take always pair by pair. Take one and pair it with the other. So they all come in pairs. This being, this is. When this arises, or this arising this arises. So, craving arising, suffering arises. Craving being, suffering is. Craving ceasing, suffering ceases. And then cessation, Noble Eightfold Path. In the Noble Eightfold Path, it's very good discourse for you to remember, the Maha-nidana Sutta in Majjhima Nikaya, grade 40. There's Samma ditthissa samma sankappo pahoti. Samma sankappassa samma vacha pahoti, samma vachasa, samma kammanto pahoti, samma kammantasa, samma ajivo pahoti, samma ajiva, samma vayamo pahoti, samma vayama, samma sati pahoti, samma vayama satisa, samma samadhi pahoti, samma samadhi, samma sati pahoti, and so forth. That means when one arises, then samma ditthi arises, samma sankappa arises. When right understanding arises, right thinking arises. Because when the right understanding is there, we cannot have wrong thinking. When right understanding arises, along with that, at this very moment, right thinking arises. Samma sankappa. Like that entire Noble Eightfold Path, we have to take 2 by 2, just like independent origination. So, that is why when Venerable Konnanya, at the end of the discourse of the first sermon, he ended up in attaining stream entry. What did he say when he attained the stream entry? What did he say? He said, Yang kinchi samudaya dhammam sabbantan nirodhammam. That which has the nature of rising has the nature of falling. That has the nature of rising, that has the nature of falling. It is just like when you throw something in the air, it must come down. Just like that. So Buddha said that in the first way of overcoming asava, the influx, first thing is seeing with wisdom, not with this eyes, seeing with wisdom. How do we get this wisdom? How do we get this wisdom? We get this wisdom through the practice of meditation, particularly insight meditation, vipassana meditation. Vi means very special. Visesa in Pali, Visesa. Vi, Visesa. Visesa means special. Passana means seeing. Seeing in a very special way. A special way of seeing is not with our eyes. What we see with our eyes, we cannot see the truth. What we see is the shape, size, color, and so forth. But we don't see with eyes is the truth of impermanence. Truth of impermanence we cannot see with our eyes. When we see the leaves on trees change in the fall, we saw the changed leaves. We don't see changing leaves. We don't see changing leaves. We see changed leaves. We don't see the temperature rising, but we feel the temperature rising. We don't see temperature dropping, but we feel the temperature drop temperature. Like that, that is outside things. Therefore, even empirically you cannot see impermanence as it is happening. But this special way of seeing takes place only when we close our eyes, introspectively pay attention to our own feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. Introspectively, impartially. And then we can pinpoint the origin of our suffering. Therefore, Buddha said, when he attacks wisely in this way, three fetters are abandoned in him. In this discourse, Buddha mentioned three fetters. What are three fetters? Personality view, doubt and adherence to rules and observances. In Pali, Sakkaya Ditthi, Vicikicca, Silabbata Paramasa. That means when we see these three fetters rising and three fetters fading away, he learn to let go of them and attain stream entry. So, overcoming flood, Kamoga, Bhavoga, Dittoga, Avidyoga, these four kinds of floods, by seeing, one can attain the stream entry by overcoming three more fetters, not only these underlying tendencies or influxes, but overcoming three more fetters. Wrong view. Here the translation is personality view. Why it is called personality view? Because Pali word is Sat, Kaya, Ditti. Sat means ease. Kaya means body. Ditti means view. That means there is unchanging body. And that view disappears when you pay mindful attention. In the mindful attention, what we do, what do we see? Changing, impermanence. We can see the body changing internally. Long time later, we see the internal changes expressed through externally. Internal changes expressed externally. And that's all we see. But internal changes we don't see. Only when we pay mindful, wise, undivided, impartial attention. And that is why vipassana means seeing things as they really are, or seeing things in a very special way. Friends, this is not the way we normally see ourselves. So we have to have a very special training to see us as we are. And that special training comes from paying wise attention. Wise attention is impartial, unbiased attention. Anytime any bias sneak into our vision, into our thinking, then we cannot see us exactly as they are, to get rid of this personality view. And then doubt about our practice, doubt about this teaching, doubt about ourselves will vanish. There are all kinds of doubts. I just may simplify them to these few things. And
I have a question about this. For example, doubt. How do we know if the fetters are eliminated when they're not arisen? Like, it could be for a really long time that one has no doubt, like maybe a year, because it's on such a subtle level that it has not manifested. And how does one know if it's eliminated for sure?
You see, only way to know that the doubt is eliminated is that one can see the changes taking place within oneself without any exception. Impermanence taking place within oneself without any exception. Then the doubt will completely vanish. I think I mentioned to you, I don't know whether in this class or somewhere, in Samyutta Nikaya there's a discourse called Khemaka Sutta. Khemaka Sutta. Venerable Khemaka was very sick. There were a group of monks who sent a messenger. Messenger's name is called Dasaka. They asked Bhikkhu Venerable Dasaka to go and find out how Khemaka was doing. He went and asked how he was doing. He said, I'm very sick, I have a lot of pain, it is not decreasing, it is increasing. So he came back to this group of monks and reported this. Then the group of monks sent him back again, asking him, is he attached to his aggregates, 5 aggregates? Khemaka said no. So he came back and reported this to this monk. He said, Khemaka says he is not attached to his aggregates. Then they said, then he must be Arahant. Go and ask him whether he is Arahant. So he went 3rd time and asked him whether he is Arahant. He said, no, I am not Arahant. So he came back and reported. 4th time they sent him back. So this Venerable Khemaka, although he was very sick and hardly able to move, he felt so sorry for this monk going back and forth, back and forth. He said, give me my walking stick. Took the walking stick and he walked to those group of monks. And then they asked him directly, are you attached to your aggregates? Brothers, I am not attached to my aggregates, but I cannot get rid of this belief in I am. I am. Although all other defilements are gone, but the feeling I am is still in me. Then they ask, how come if you are not attached to your body, feeling and so on, how come you have this notion of I am? Then he began to think a way to explain this to these monks. He probably might have not thought of it before. When these monks press so hard, push against the wall, so to say, and he began to think. It happened to Venerable Ananda also one day. He began to think. While he is thinking, he expressed his thinking to these monks. He said, monks, Venerable brothers, suppose there is a lotus flower. It has a fragrance. Where is this fragrance? In the petals, leaves, stalks, and nectar. Where? They said, not in one particular place. It's all over the flower. While he was explaining this, he was thinking of himself. And then he knows that his notion is slowly diluting, becoming weak. And he said, suppose I give you another example. You have your laundry. You give your laundry to laundryman. He takes them and clean using all kind of detergents. the kind of detergents mentioned in the book I don't want to mention today now, because we have more sophisticated detergents these days. Anyway, you give to the laundryman, he uses detergents and clean your clothes, bring it back, and then you smell the detergent in the clothes. That happens to us when we wash our using certain detergents. Then you take this clothes with detergent smell and put into a cupboard and put some camphor or something to get rid of that.
Cedar. Was it cedar, Bhante?
Yeah, I don't know what we do. And then take it out, then that detergent odor is gone. Cloth is clean. Similarly, when you investigate each and every part of your aggregates, you don't find any leftover, even tiny little iota permanent. You see, you permeate the entire body with your mind, and you don't see any permanent entity. And then your doubt will vanish, your notion of self vanish, and the thought of I am vanish. So that is the example I had to tell you to know. I mean, if we remember this simile, and we can use that to understand how we know that we have no doubt. That means our awareness of impermanence must be purified and perfect in order to get rid of doubt. Now, we are not talking about speculative, philosophical, logical doubts related to various other things in the universe, and that we will never come to any conclusion. And Buddha himself has said, if you go on thinking of the universe, you go crazy. I don't know whether if he came today, he would change his view, his teaching. But even if he came today, still he will tell us, don't think of the universe, you will go crazy. Think of yourself. Okay? I don't know, you, some of you are very sharp physicists, know a lot of physics. I'm not going to argue with you. Anyway, this is how I think you can get rid of your doubt. Now, when you do not have this vision, dasana means seeing, then because of that, you think of the past. Was I in the past? How was I in the past? What I was in the past? What have become from what to what? Then, and so forth. You think of the future. Will I be? Will I not be? How I will be? Where I will be? And with what I will be, and so on. In the present, you ask the question: Am I? Am I not? Who am I? What am I? Where I came from? Where will I go? All this. In all these cases, you use the word I. When we think in terms of I, not in the conventional sense, but permanent, eternal, unchanging I, then you are caught in the personality view. But if we use the word I in order just to communicate as a, ordinary in our ordinary business, then it is perfectly all right. We have to use it. So that is why Buddha said, the influx or the asavas can be overcome by seeing, not by not seeing. That is one way of overcoming asavas out of 7. I don't know, friend, whether I can finish the whole discourse today. Our class is supposed to be 1 hour. By now you may also already be tired. I can go on until we end this notes that you have. Then first one is Darsana Pahadabba. Second one is actually not Darsana. Second one is restraining. First is seeing, second is discipline, restraining. Restraining is that we have to restrain our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and mind with mindful, wise attention. That is, when we see objects, we always must bring our mindfulness to understand the object not superficially, but the object is an object which is neither beautiful nor ugly, but an object made up of aggregates which are all subject to change. Any object we see with our eyes is subject to change. In a conventional superficial say, we say it is either beautiful or ugly, attractive, not attractive, young, old, and so forth. But in any given situation, any given moment, any object we see is an object made up of elements. They all are subject to change, and they are changing, which we don't see. Only with mindful reflection we can see that. Sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought, all are like that. All are subject to change. They are changing. In what you call Samanya-pala Sutta and various discourses, Buddha has explained the way how we see objects mindfully, with mindful reflection. Then the third is asava or the ogres to be abandoned by using. Patisevana. Patisevana means using. In Indian tradition, they have a religious sect called Jainism. They practice the principle of denial. They deny. They deny everything, including wearing clothes. They are called Digambara. Digambara means their clothes is the direction, not physical clothes that we all wear. That means they are naked. They are still there in India. And the other sect of that particular religion is called Svetambra. They wear only white clothes. Why is that? They deny the pleasure because they want to eliminate their previous karma. In this life they don't commit any karma. By not committing karma now, this is called inactive, they live life without enjoying anything because they have enjoyed so many things in previous life. In this life they suffer. Therefore, in this life they want to deny. It's called apratigraha, I think, practice. And the Buddha did not fall into one extreme or the other. He was in one extreme as a prince. Then he went to the other extreme by denying everything, practicing self-mortification. And he avoided these two. And then he selected middle path. In this middle path, he says, we have to use what we have to use. We have to use food, clothes, medicine and shelter, especially what we call 4 requisites for the monastic. We must use them, we must use clothes with mindful reflection. That's called yoniso manasikara. And we recited patisankha, yoniso chivarang patisevami, yavadeva sitarsa patighataya. I say it in English because to save time. I use this cloth to protect me from sun, cold, wind, gadflies, mosquitoes, snakes and so forth. And I use this cloth to cover my nakedness. And then that is the purpose of wearing clothes. Then there is the meditation section on that. This cloth is made up of 4 elements. They are clean, but the one who uses this cloth, when he uses it, it turns into dirty. It becomes dirty. And these clothes are made up of elements. Similarly, the one who consumes this cloth, uses this cloth, also is made up of elements. These clothes are impermanent, the one who uses them is impermanent, and so forth. Then we come to food. You may have noticed we recite at the meal time. I use this food not for intoxicating, not for play, not for building up, making us more attractive, but to overcome our pain of hunger, not to introduce pain of overeating. And I use this food to maintain my monastic life, religious life. And then this food also is made up of 4 elements. The one who consumes of 4 elements, made up of 4 elements. This food is not a permanent being, not permanent self. The one who consumes that also not permanent being, and so forth. Meditate. One thing we use remind ourselves of the purpose of using these 4 requisites. On the other hand, we use these 4 requisites with mindful reflection to understand the nature, the truth of these 4 requisites. And therefore, how we overcome our taints or asava, influxes, by using them. the greed or desire we have for these four requisites will reduce. Food, clothes, lodging and medicine. We can become attached to them. We can be gluttonous. We can be greedy. We can be what you call very luxurious. Buddha wanted us to live a very simple life with contentment. And therefore, with this in mind, we use these requisites for very simple, practical purpose. Nothing beyond that. And therefore, whatever greed, ignorance, hatred, for instance, when the food is not good, some aversion can arise. When the cloth is not of certain desired color, dislike or aversion can arise. And the shelter is not of our particular inclination, aversion and dislike can arise. But therefore, in order to avoid all this, we use with mindful all these four requisites with mindful reflection. And the fourth way is adivasana. Adivasana means abandoning by enduring with lot of patience. Sometimes cold, heat. For instance, now it is very hot. What can you do? Of course, we don't have air conditioner. Somebody can say. Buddha was not thinking of today's modern technological society. Buddha was talking about the time, the condition he had 2,600 years ago. When it is hot, we have to bear up the heat. No complaint, because this is the nature. We cannot fight against that. Cold, heat, sometimes wind, sometimes rains. Above all, there will be situations where we will be insulted, accused, abused by others, using very harsh words, abusive words. I remember in many times monks have been insulted, using various abusive language. Buddha said, try to be patient, try to tolerate them, have compassion on them, and you practice your own Dhamma. That way, aversion for anger, aversion for abuse will disappear, impatience will disappear. And that is why in Mangala Sutta, I mentioned this several times, all these are, friends, very 100% practical things he said. Mangala Sutta ends, Puttha Sulokanamehi Chittan Yasya na Kampati Asokam Virajam Kemang Etam Mangala Muttavam. When one is touched by worldly vicissitudes, ups and downs, worldly conditions, one would not be disturbed, one would not be upset. That, Buddha said, is a blessing. Puttha Salokadame Chittam Yasana Kampati. The mind will not be shaken. Mind will remain steady, calm, relaxed. That, Buddha said, is a blessing. Puttha Salokadame Chittam Yasana Kampati. Asokam Virajan Kema. At that time he will not sorrow, he will not become attached, rajan, kemang, peaceful. That's a blessing. So, adivasana is another way of overcoming our flood, the influx, this particular defilement. Then, abandoning by avoiding. One should avoid wild elephants, wild animals, tigers, lions and so forth, snakes and so forth, and places where there are a lot of other problems, and avoid very unwise, foolish individual who try to tempt us to do wrong things, avoid them, and whatever is harmful to our practice should be avoided. Even people, it is said that when we go on alms round with our alms bowl, if you go to a certain house, if they either do not give anything or give something with grudging, with complaints, reluctance, don't go to that house, because they are not friendly. They even can hurt you, eventually thinking that this bald-headed man in yellow robe come and troubles us. If they show that kind of attitude, avoid them, Buddha said. Worst case is, if that happens very often and they insult you, hurt you, then you go and punish them. How to punish? It's called patta nikkujjana kamma. Patta nikkujjana kamma means you take your alms bowl, go to that, stand in front of the house, and when the people come to offer something with anger and grudge and so forth, turn the alms bowl upside down. That is the biggest punishment to them, and go away. So avoid. These are physical avoiding. Then the number 6 is removing, and enduring, avoiding, removing. Vinodana. Vinodana means removing uppannam kāmitakkan nādivāsīti pajāti vinodeti bhante karoti anubhavam gameti. When sensual desire arises in the mind, the mindful person, wise person, remove it from the mind. Vinodana. When it arises in the mind, thinking of its disadvantage, remove it from the mind. Greed, hatred, delusion, anger, jealousy, fear and so forth, these mental states that troubles oneself, mindfully that person should remove them from the mind. Then the last one is developing Bhavana. You see, Bhavana. There Buddha mentioned only the 7 factors of enlightenment to practice. 7 factors of enlightenment for the benefit of those who do not remember. Some of you may remember, some of you may not. Therefore, I don't want to ask any question, I simply want to mention the 7 factors. 7 factors: number 1, mindfulness; number 2, investigation; number 3, effort; number 4, tranquility; sati, dhammeche, viriya, piyata, joy. 4th is joy, piyati. 5th is tranquility. 6th is concentration. 7th is equanimity. So these are the 7 factors of enlightenment. They are called Sambojjhanga. Sati what do you call, Passaddhi Sampojjhanga, Samadhi Sampojjhanga and Upekkha Sampojjhanga. These are the 7. By cultivating these, their opposite can be overcome. What are the opposite? Unmindfulness can be overcome by practicing mindfulness. Sati Sampojjhanga. Then getting doubt can be overcome by investigation. 2nd. Laziness and drowsiness can be overcome by Virya Sampojjhanga, perseverance. Then piety, lethargic and sort of disheartened, depression, depressed feeling can be overcome by Pita Sampojjhanga. Then restless mind can be overcome by tranquility meditation. Then unconcentrated mind scattered here and there, people complain always, I cannot concentrate. That kind of state can be overcome by concentration meditation. Then balancing all these things will be done by equanimity practice, equanimity factor. These 7 are, all these are very beautiful system. Noble Eightfold Path from the beginning to the end has a gradual system. This is called, therefore the whole teaching of the Buddha is called Anupubba Sikha, Anupubba Kriya, Anupubba Patipada. Anupubba means gradual. Noble Eightfold Path is developed gradually. 7 factors of enlightenment develop gradually. And so forth, everything is done gradually. And then culmination is, the crown is, the blossoming is the most beautiful, successful relief from suffering. Relief of suffering. I think, friends, this is enough for Dhamma talk. Other section we will continue next week. Now, if you have any question, I can spend few more minutes answering your questions. Anybody?
The first thing I think of for explaining joy is having gratitude for things.
Excuse me?
The first thing I think of when you want to practice joy is having gratitude for things.
Yes.
Wouldn't it be best?
Yeah.
It's more of an insightful.
I think if you lived in the time of the Buddha, you would recommend this to the Buddha, Buddha would approve it. Eh? Okay.
I have a question about the fruit of becoming. Because fruit of becoming, is it time? I mean, can you explain a little more about this fruit of becoming?
Becoming is in a simple language, want to become a human and be human. How many things we have to do to be a human? To become a human. I'm not talking about doing karma in the previous life. Now we already have become human. Now, to be a human even now is so difficult. So, upadana paccaya bhava. Upadana paccaya bhava. That means, depending on clinging, grasping, we become. we have an idea of how human being is, and we try to fulfill that idea, implement that idea, be that ideal human being. You see? So we attach to that image in our mind and do all sort of things to be that human. In Maha-nidana Sutta in Digha Sutta number 15, Buddha Venerable Ananda, if there is no such thing as human being, would there be a human being? No. In order to be a human being, we use language, we use indication, we use conventions, we use beliefs, itthatam paññāpanāya, adivacanapato, niruccipato, veyākaranam, paññātipato, paññāvacaram, adivacanapata, the designations, and language, indications, signs, marks, and vision. We all use to make that being, which is called human being. Similarly, divine being, animals, and so forth and so on, certain image we have, and we try to do things to fit that image, do things to pair the image, pair with the image. That is called being. Being or not to being is the question. Shakespeare asked, isn't it? So, that is very profound state.
Thank you.
It's very exhausting.
Hmm?
It's very exhausting to be a human being.
Yes. Yes. More exhausting today because it is so hot. I think this is enough for today.